Hi, everyone. Hope you're all doing well today. We're so excited to have you joining us today on Global Accessibility Awareness Day for our webinar, UX Spotlight, How Salesforce Used Accessibility Research in Their Web Redesign. My name is Lynette. I'm part of the team here at AnswerLab. And before we start, just want to run through a couple of quick housekeeping items. So this webinar is being recorded and everyone's going to be receiving a recording via email afterward. So if for any reason you're disconnected or we experience technical issues, we'll make sure you still receive this content. If you have any questions you'd like to submit, please do so via the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we will try our best to answer them at the end of this discussion. I'll be moderating our presentation today, so you may see me pop off camera as we work through the conversation. We are going to do our best to keep this to 45 minutes so you can stay on track for the rest of your day. For those of you who haven't heard of AnswerLab, we are a full-service user experience research firm that specializes in enterprise research services to deliver user insight across every stage of product development. Our mission is to help create experiences that people love. Today's panel discussion features Salesforce leaders Stephanie Maxwell and Karen Milne in conversation with AnswerLab's Richard Douglas. Stephanie Maxwell currently serves as Senior Manager of Digital Research at Salesforce, joining the company in 2017. She holds a doctorate in Human Development from US Davis. Karen Milne is a Director of Digital Accessibility on the marketing team at Salesforce, specifically focused on website accessibility and public-facing experiences. Richard Douglas is a Principal UX Researcher here at AnswerLab. For over 20 years, he has led accessibility work as a member of internal teams and as a consultant. Over the years, he has worked on accessibility engagements with companies such as Salesforce, Airbnb, IBM, Google, PlayStation, American Express, and State Street Global Advisors. Now, before we jump into the conversation, let's lay the groundwork with an important question. What is accessibility research? Richard's going to kick us off with an introduction and discuss some benefits of applying accessibility research to your research program.
Great. Thank you, Lynette. Accessibility research mirrors similar technologies that user experience researchers typically conduct, be it usability testing, expert reviews, exploratory research, and the like. But with accessibility research, we're including participants that have disabilities and often use assistive technologies such as screen readers, screen magnifiers, and other assistive technology. Some of the benefits of conducting accessibility research is we're able to uncover more accessibility challenges than just conducting a scan of the code using an external tool. Often what we uncover during accessibility research relates to interaction design. Some of the nuance of how a participant actually makes use of an application or a website, for example. These are typically not covered in a code scan. Also, in many cases, we find our clients are using the deliverables from accessibility research as effective tools to build empathy with others in their company.
Great, thank you, Richard, for that overview.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk a little bit about what drove Salesforce to begin including rounds of accessibility research. Could you share a bit of your story with us?
So I can start this off. We initially when we came into this about 4 years ago, so Salesforce has a very long history in product accessibility, but marketing was a bit of a late bloomer. But when we started jumping on board, looking at our public-facing websites, we had a legacy tool that we started using. We already had it. We just started applying it a little bit more rigorously. And as we became more knowledgeable about accessibility and we understood that automated scans, to Richard's point, can only get you about 50% of the way there. You really need to do manual testing. You have to have experts actually to look at the code, to look at the visuals, etc. And we kind of matured as we went along from doing those dry, just go by the numbers type of reports to having more manual testing and more of a two-way conversation, which is what we really introduced when we started doing research with people in the field. I mean, it really gave us a whole third layer to the way that we were working on maturing our own program.
Great, thank you, Karen. Could you tell us a bit about how Salesforce was addressing accessibility before involving AnswerLab? How did things change and evolve after?
As I was saying, we kind of started out with those automatic tools. Once our in-house team became more knowledgeable, we ran more manual tests. That actual, we always knew we wanted to do usability testing. It's something I've done in the past and have always placed a very high value on it. There's so many things that you just don't think of as you're testing as a single person in a silo. And I knew it was important. Stephanie really went the extra mile. I think we had a lot of challenges in the beginning, just finding tools that were accessible themselves, which was our first hurdle.
Yeah, we had been doing user research for a while, very focused on usability. And when Karen connected with me, I was like, hey, let's broaden participants we include and start looking at accessibility. One of the problems we ran into is a lot of tools we use for remote research aren't accessible themselves. So that's part of the reason we were like, hey, we need to partner with someone who can help us with this. And AnswerLab has been a great partner in that. Karen touched on this earlier, using like those automated tools, and even we do have some experts, consultants who use screen readers and can like go through different parts of the website we're making for us, point out some obvious issues, but it's not the same as having a group of people who have different levels of comfort using accessibility tools. So like assistive technology, you may just start using that recently, or maybe you've been using it for years. Either way, we should be able to meet you where you are and help you get through the website. So someone who's an expert can show us their tips and tricks to get around any issues they may run into. But when you're testing with someone who's newer and they don't know those tips and tricks, they literally can get just stuck. And that's not a good experience. It doesn't feel good watching it, but it's very, you feel empathetic. That becomes a big problem if you see someone just get stuck on your website and you want to address that more quickly.
Great, those are some great points. For those who are watching, listening, perhaps taking notes, what are some considerations to keep in mind when preparing for and fielding accessibility research?
Well, one thing that I can contribute here, just being the selfish person I am, I work on public-facing websites. So public-facing websites are incredibly visual. We have an amazing design team that goes to the ultimate brand experience at all times. So when we have to think about how people who can't see this amazing brand experience, what's the experience like for them, and how do we really get our brand across to people without having we're relying on something visual.
Yeah, and if I could add to that, at AnswerLab, we conduct a lot of research remotely, and there's value in doing that with accessibility research. One of the key benefits is the participants get to use the assistive technology that they own and are very familiar with. So it really helps in that regard. However, we've also conducted this type of research in our usability labs as well. One of the values or one of the positives about conducting it in a lab is we're actually able to see the participant's screen. So for example, if we have a participant that's using screen magnification, we can actually see straight away what the participant's seeing on their monitor as they're zooming in, possibly changing the color contrast, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I would add to that, Richard, is and even more recently, we've gotten more into mobile research and how people use our websites on their mobile devices. And that interaction is even that much more intimate than when you're on a desktop. type of situation where you're swiping, you're scrolling. It's a whole different way of interacting with a device. And WCAG, which is the standards that we try to adhere to, keeps adding on criteria as they evolve, trying to address some of these newer devices, and there's the newer interactions people have with them, like swiping or touch screens.
Great. Richard, could you talk a little bit about the fielding and recruitment process?
Sure. Some of the things that we've learned over the years being involved in this type of research is that some of the recruiting for this type of audience can be problematic. We oftentimes get into some odd situations around terminology and the like, what participants are willing to share, that sort of thing. Where we've landed to sort of oversimplify things is we recruit by the use of assistive technology and how often they use it. So typically on most projects, we're seeking participants that use assistive technology in a given segment, and that they need to use that all the time when they're using either a mobile device or their computer.
All right. Now, let's talk a little bit about preparing stimuli for accessibility research. How does it differ from other research projects?
So I'll take this one. We do research at different stages of projects. Oftentimes in early stages, we are given prototypes, something maybe in Figma, Envision, another prototyping tool. You can't always test those with people who use assistive technology, especially screen reader users. So there is more lead time into preparing a prototype for this kind of test. It requires me running around and asking people to help me create these higher fidelity prototypes. And usually people are super on board with helping, which is awesome. But you do have to, it's not something that can be handed off the day before, which sometimes happens. Really, production or near production level code is the types of prototypes we test with screen reader users. That's not to say we haven't tested with Figma before, using Figma prototypes. In working on these different studies, we include people who use various types of assistive technology. So if I do have an early Figma prototype and someone uses a magnifier, we can show them that. Just unfortunately, with that group of screen reader users, we can't always use that. But we'll show early prototypes, lower fidelity early prototypes to like a neurodiverse group of participants. They can give us feedback on that. So you really have to be more aware of the type of prototype you're using and the audience that can use it, can attest with it.
All right. So now that you've conducted this research, how do you go about communicating your research findings internally? Can you share some tips or ways that have worked at Salesforce?
Yeah, so I'll jump in. I would say video is absolutely key. So Stephanie and I work in a very large group, and one of the key things about kicking off any kind of program, accessibility, even more so than anything else, is really making people aware that, we just don't want to hit a certain number. We don't want to, of course we want to be compliant, but just saying you're compliant is kind of a hollow thing. But showing them you're actually doing this for the benefit of real people and having those real people add their voice to the conversation and actually engage our executives who fund the research, saying this is, either they see how painful it is or they see something that helps them. And they realize it's like, yes, this is all going for the good of everyone. And we know that if you raise the level of accessibility on a site, you're raising the usability for everybody. So it's just been super, super helpful. And I have to say the teams that have been funding us and helping us and supporting us have been we've been at this for 4 years. It's been a critical thing to keeping us going and keeping us alive and keeping our work going.
Top of mind. Related to what Karen was saying, video helps us a lot in terms of building empathy. A good example is we work with stakeholders and partners from all over the world because we have websites all over the world. And so they can't always watch the sessions live or attend the readout, but I share video clips from the readout with them. And I shared one over to a group in Australia who works on the Australian website, and they thought the audio was wrong, that I had sent over a messed up clip, that it wasn't working quite right. And that can happen. So I would recheck the clip and it was fine. They just had never seen or heard someone use a screen reader before while on the website. And so we were testing at that time a video experience. So the video was playing and the screen reader was trying to read the closed captions, and it was a lot going on. So it seems a little, well, it's overwhelming for everybody. But they had misinterpreted me having some audio issues with their actual screen reader trying to read to them the page they were on. And when I explained, nope, that's how you experience it, it gave a new level of, oh my gosh, that's a lot. And these participants are amazing in that they can, take in so much so quickly and do all that stuff. But we also need to be aware of, how we make the website easier for them. So that was a good one where we shared that and they're like, oh, wow, that's actually how it is. Other tips for communicating. So we use Slack a lot. I have different levels of, readout or reports. So I will share like the top learnings, the top 5 learnings in a Slack post with the video clips. People who are really interested can go deep into like a full report if they want to. So matching the audience and your readout are really important. So I also do things like, hey, we did this many hours of research, but you can watch this 30-minute highlight reel or 20-minute highlight reel. And that like gets people like, oh, okay, well, I'm not spending 12 hours doing it. I'm spending 20 minutes to capture it. So even marketing to our marketers works a lot.
Yeah, I have to say the best part about video is that it's forever. So I can't tell you how many meetings I've been in with Stephanie where someone has brought up a design pattern, the way we word something, and Stephanie will be like, oh, we tested something just like that 2 years ago, and here's what they said. So it's, it's good. It's not us. It gives us the reason to push back sometimes when it's like, when we have data in our pocket, we can prove that, maybe you want to consider something else.
Yeah.
That's great. It's great that you found ways to build empathy, kind of as Stephanie mentioned. Now, let's jump into some examples of iterating on features or functions over multiple rounds. Could you share a few nuggets with us?
So I can start on this one. So I mentioned earlier about branding. Salesforce is a very marketing-driven company. Branding is very important. And it's interesting when you take the visual away, like how long will it take someone to understand the concept you're trying to convey? And we have launched a number of new things over the years we've been doing this. One of them that I can put my finger on is Salesforce Plus, which is a streaming service. It's very similar to a Netflix, but it's corporate business topics and podcasts, different webinars, things like that. But how do you convey that to someone? It's like, do you understand what you're experiencing here? We would kind of put them in that area of the site and see how long it took people to understand yes, this is a streaming service. Once you sign up for it, which is free, you get to, it unlocks all the content. So how do they actually take advantage of that journey? And how do we make it appeal to them more? And we've done multiple rounds on that particular experience over the last year or so.
Yeah, I think what's been great about some of the items that we brought in over time is we've been able to highlight areas that need to be improved. The teams that are working on those make changes, and then we're able to come back later and see what the result is. And so, for example, with Salesforce Plus, we had a lot of folks early on that couldn't figure out what it was, or had a lot of difficulty with some of the video players that were being featured. And just this last round that we did recently, there was this FAQ section at the bottom that really did a great job for most of the participants and really trying to understand what Salesforce Plus is, because for many of them, it's sort of a brand new concept of having a big software company like Salesforce present a streaming service.
Another one that we've done multiple rounds for is our navigation. So I've been working on the navigation since 2017. It's a company, Salesforce has grown a lot. So the more products and services that are included, that grows the navigation. And I think the very first time we tested the navigation, it was before we started redesigning it. And Richard might remember, it was the Mega Nav. Like, it was when everything just got kind of pushed under products, and it was like, it weren't grouped in a way that was easy. So like, if you wanted to know, if you had a screen reader and couldn't see the list of 20 products to start exploring, you had to wait for the whole list to be read to you. So that's gone, yay. But over the last couple of years, we've done a lot of, and our navigation is still actually complex, but it's very user-friendly now, and accessible. So the first few rounds, we started working on grouping things. Like, I don't need to hear a whole list of all 20. So is there a way for you to group them? And then we focused really, a couple of rounds of research really were focused on the global navigation, the top navigation. But we knew that we also have these within section navigations that if you go today, there's a stacked nav in some sections, and we were concerned that that's a lot. Like, you have a whole global navigation, and then you have a whole other navigation in there. And how do we get people who can't see the differentiation to understand when to use which one? I did a lot of usability research on it beforehand. So I came up with tasks, and then I was like, hey, Richard, let's do these tasks, with screen reader users and see how that goes. So I do highly recommend, whatever test you're doing, finding a way to pilot it in some way, because you don't want to write a task that doesn't make sense. Luckily, I got the chance to pilot those, and then we use those again for accessibility user research. Some things we found along the way, the stack nav is usually announced in some way, and the nav that's section specific or site section specific is the contextual nav, or I don't remember how it's announced, but people weren't picking up on the word contextual, or it didn't quite resonate with them. So it's something like we've revisited, but those are things you notice over time. And most recently, we've done a round of mobile testing on it. So we've kept it moving forward, and if we found something, we take it back to the team, share it with them, they would iterate on that, and then we'd retest it again. And over the last couple of years, it looks, I think initially people think, wow, how does someone use this navigation? But I assure you, we've done now 7 rounds of research on it, and it's in a good place. So that's actually one of the first questions we get when talking about it with various teams about the navigation. Have you looked at accessibility here? And I get to say yes. 7 rounds, 72 people now test that with different types of assistive technology, and it's in a good place. Nothing is ever perfect, right? We don't know all the assistive technology out there, but over time you get to see how much easier it gets when we do think about accessibility along the way.
Yeah, I think navigation is particularly challenging, especially at a company with as many products as us, simply because we tend to use the crutch of visually representing things in groups, where with people who use screen readers in particular, it's a very linear experience. Everything's going to have a hierarchy. That hierarchy needs to inform them as to where they are, what the object is that they're focused on. All of those things become flattened. And so you can't just throw up a bunch of words in a picture and expect people to put it all together, because you just don't have that option. You have to really use a structure to pull the meaning out of something.
Another thing that's come up more recently that we've started looking at is I've noticed along the way, and I think we've all run into this, our branded terms don't always sound great when read on a screen reader. You get interesting, I mean, we have companies like or products like Tableau, MuleSoft, Salesforce Plus is an interesting one when it's reading it on a screen reader. And we've started to talk about the themes or the functions of those products and services, and include the name of the brand, but so that people understand what we're referring to, because there's, again, no visual there. If I just hear Tableau read to me, I might not know that that's a, business intelligence tool. But we've started looking at themes and functions as a way of helping that some. So yeah.
Great. As you mentioned, nothing is perfect, but it's obvious you put a lot of intention behind your work. And I'd love to hear more about particular aspects of the work you've done that you're really proud of, some problems that you solved, or light bulb moments.
Yeah, so I can start this out. We had this just recently when we were testing, I think it might have been the navigation, where one of our participants was using a very unusual combination of browser and screen reader, and the experience was completely broken for them. It just literally stopped us in our tracks, and we're like, oh, well, that's kind of a unique mix of things, but now it really got us thinking about like our tools and technologies. And you have to be careful. Don't only test on the laptop your company gives you, because the combination that a user is using could be completely different. And that was super eye-opening.
Let's see, what would I recently we had a very okay, so a lot of websites have tables, right, for displaying different types of information. One that we run into is pricing. We use a table to display features, additions, and pricing. I had never tested that kind of a complex piece of information with someone with a screen reader. I didn't know how they would approach it. But we do have an awesome person on our team, Noel, who makes great prototypes and is very, very focused on accessibility. And we're not at production level code yet, but he made a prototype so I could test some of these interactions they were working on in Figma. And just working closely with him, I was not scared, but like, okay, what could go wrong? It worked out really well, actually. And so I would say I'm proud to work with the team I work with, and that they think about these things. And the more we've been working and talking about accessibility and watching these videos and sharing it and empathy, people are starting to think about it for themselves. And so testing something that worked really well when I was very like, oh, how's this going to work, it felt great. I was like immediately like, yes, it's working. People can actually get to the boxes and things like that. So there's that was one I was really proud of lately. And then just keeping this program going we're over 2 years, heading into 3 years, where Karen and I are in marketing. So programs that last that long are surprising. There's a lot of pivoting, right? So for the company to continue to invest in us and for people to ask for this research and to then want to give us their thing they're working on earlier, instead of like, oh, I think this might be broken, instead giving it to us early and asking us early, how can I make this accessible, or can we get this into testing, has been like really something I think we're really proud of. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to say, Stephanie mentioned before that we work on Slack a lot, and not a day goes by that I don't get a message from someone I have no idea who they are, who's saying, I was told that I have to ask you if this is successful. And it's just like knowing that we've made enough of a change that at least people know what accessibility is, they know it's important, and they know that they're going to tell someone else, oh, are you introducing a new design? Make sure that somebody checks it.
Yeah, if I could add to that, I think one of the things that I appreciate as a consultant working with a client like Salesforce is I really appreciate the approach they're taking to redesigning their public-facing website. I think traditionally the approach has been blow it all up and put up a brand new one, and away you go. And I think enough people have realized over time that that's not a great way to redesign your website. You lose a lot with that. Even if the navigation's improved, people need to figure out what happened. You lose a lot of SEO, all that sort of thing. What we're doing here, what I'm helping to support them as they're changing different pieces and parts of the site. And so the sessions that I'm leading are a mixture of things that are an idea that we might iterate on, as well as things that are already in production that have already passed through a number of rounds of research, and now we're just validating. So it's kind of a mix of pieces and parts, which I think is really the more modern and more thoughtful way to redesign a public-facing website the way that they're approaching it.
Yeah, I would add that we're also very careful with measuring everything before and after, so that if we do make a change, we assure ourselves that it's a positive one before we commit to it.
It's wonderful to hear about the direct impact that you've all seen. Now, looking forward into the future, are you using accessibility research in new areas and services?
Yeah. So very recently we wrapped up a round of research with Richard on mobile. So we have done almost 3 years regular rounds of research and hadn't done mobile yet. And that's partly because even just with usability research, the planning and the preparation and recruitment's a little different if you're doing desktop and mobile. Getting participants ready to join a session, things like that. But we went for it. We all went for it. We're like, let's do it. Let's do a session with mobile and look at how different aspects of the website. One of them was the navigation, because we had been doing mainly desktop until then. How does that work for someone? And I found that so interesting because I'll be honest, I have worked with participants from neurodiverse backgrounds since 2007, but I haven't worked with as many people who are blind. And I never thought about, how does someone use a touch screen? How do you use a touch screen if you can't see it? I didn't think about that. So watching those sessions were really eye-opening. Just watching someone try to, I learned what kinds of things they do in order to navigate a website, and how do you know where you're at on a website if it's on mobile and you can't just start typing things in. So that was a whole new area we've gone into, and I found it really fascinating.
Yeah, one of the ways that we accommodate participants that are using mobile devices, particularly that are using screen readers, is we ask them to join the same Zoom link or whatever the web conferencing platform we're using with their mobile device and their computer. And it takes a little while to set things up. So we work pretty closely with our recruiting partners to make sure we have an effective walk-in. And essentially they're using their computer as a microphone for the screen reader of their mobile device. So you have to sort of like mute one device, and it can get a little complicated. And if you do it wrong, you have some feedback. But if we're able to step folks through that, it's a really great way to learn from these participants as we're working with them at times remotely using their mobile devices. And as Stephanie said, we always learn something that we didn't expect we might learn when we conduct these types of studies.
Yeah, I give Richard a lot of credit. He's the most patient man I've ever met.
Need to tell my wife that.
Well, I know I would have given up like long before, just like the whole dial in and setting up the phone, and oh my goodness.
It's worth it. I mean, it does take
extra. Oh, it is. But
it's worth it. Like having the webcam too. So like their computer picks up what the screen reader on the phone saying, but also I was watching their webcam because of all the cool gestures they were doing on their phone. I was like, what is it? It looks totally different. It just super interesting study. So a lot more effort, but like really eye-opening, I think.
Wonderful. Thank you all for providing your insight and your experiences. We are going to shift gears here and answer a few submitted questions. We only have a few minutes, so let's see here. So first question we have, someone has asked, we may have touched upon this a little bit, but see if we can answer this a little more thoroughly. Do you take into account things like neurodivergent users, so those on the autism spectrum with ADD, ADHD, dyslexia?
Yes, we do. I mentioned it quickly before. I've worked with neurodiverse communities since 2007. That's where most of my research background is in. So when Karen came and said she wanted to do accessibility research, it's like, yes, and let's include all groups who use assistive technology. So absolutely, we include them. Those groups tend to still use assistive technology, just in different ways, I guess you could say. Still magnifying to help keep focus on certain parts of the screen. There's extensions in Chrome where you probably know the name, Richard, where you use your mouse and you hover over it and it'll read it to you. And so if you're struggling, with dyslexia, that can be helpful. My sister has dyslexia, so yeah, there's a lot of assistive technology there. There's also people use timers. So you just kind of broaden the types of assistive technology you consider in the recruitment. I don't know if you want to say Richard, you spoke about it a little earlier. If there's anything else you want to add.
No, I think you covered it pretty well.
Awesome, thank you. All right, another question that came in. Do you share the feedback for your internal facing applications as well?
So I can take that one. As far as internal facing applications at Salesforce, we do have people who look at them. As you can imagine, they're as diverse as our websites. So no one's ever going to touch everything, but people are very active. We have Slack channels where people will raise their hands immediately if they have trouble with something. And we also, one of the critical things I think for us going forward is including legal language in all of our third-party contracts that specify that any tools that we take into the company are accessible, that is part of our standard operating procedure, and that you should be able to, produce a VPAT or something like that stating that you are compliant. We're also trying to do that for marketing agencies that we deal with, where they have to say if they're going to build something for us, some microsite or something like that, that they have taken that into account, and that whatever they deliver to us is held compliant at a certain level. I think you have to work it from both ends.
Great, thank you for that. All right, another question that we have here. How can we build up a participant pipeline to include participants with disabilities in our research?
I can approach that with two different answers. One is before I joined AnswerLab and when I worked on internal teams at big companies, some of what I did was recommended to me by others that were already conducting this type of research. And that was to connect with local organizations that have people with disabilities as part of them, whether it's technology-based or whatever it might be. For example, I live very close to the state capital of my state, and so we have a state school for the blind, we have a state school for the deaf that are within 25 minutes of my house. So there's different ways that when I was working on an internal team and I was able to use those relationships, find out other folks as well that I could talk to. I talked to one of the universities that had an accessibility department as well that was helping out the students as well as the staff as well. So there's just a different way to build that network. Here at AnswerLab, what we've taken to do is that as we have participants that give us really solid feedback and are able to successfully enter a web conference, for example, for conducting remote research, if they're able to enter the web conference successfully with their assistive technology, we kind of make note of that. And we've built a list over the last couple of years of trusted participants that we can reach out to again through our recruiting partners. So they don't necessarily have to go through the full screener of a new project, but it's sort of a recontact, if you will, of these participants. For these last few rounds we've done with Salesforce, we've tried to go 50-50. So half the participants are ones that we brought back from previous rounds. And then we add in the other half for folks that we haven't spoken with before.
There's also online communities. So in the more recent rounds, we've been sharing the call to recruitment or participate in online community, our customer communities, but there's also communities specifically around assistive technology. One recommendation, if you post, hey, we're doing this, please, complete the screener, make sure your screener's accessible. And sometimes people don't want to sit and fill out a long form. So something we always used to do back in the day was provide an email or phone number. I recommend bringing that back, especially if you're going to do a call for recruitment or research study with participants who use different assistive technologies. So they can go through the screener with you over the phone or email and set up a time to talk and things like that. I think that helps too.
Great, thank you for your responses. We have run out of time, but if you've submitted a question and we didn't get to yours, we will follow up with you. So that about sums it up for today. Thank you to our panelists for a great conversation, and thank you all for attending today. Please keep an eye on your inbox. Your follow-up email will include an accessibility research best practices guide, link to the webinar recording, and links to some additional resources. And if you want to learn more about the role of accessibility research and user experience, we've got a lot of content on our website at answerlab.com/accessibility-ux-research. Thank you to our panelists again, and thank you all for attending, and we hope to see you at our next virtual event. Take care.
Bye, guys.